everyone. I'm going to do the story of The Adventures of Peter Rabbit. And I have Peter Rabbit, I have Mother Rabbit, this is Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail. And here is Mr. McGregor, and here is the watering can. Once upon a time there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail and Peter. They lived with their mother in the sandbank underneath the root of a big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields and or down the lane, but do not go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now, run along and don't get into mischief. I'm going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the woods to the baker's. She bought a loaf of bread and 5 currant buns. Okay? Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed through the gate. First he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he looked for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out some cabbages when he jumped up and ran after Peter. "Stop! Thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened and he rushed all around the garden, but he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran so fast that he might have almost got away, but he ran right into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons of his jacket. It was a blue jacket and brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave him up for lost and shed big tears. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wiggled out just in time, left his jacket behind, oh no, and rushed into the tool shed. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over very carefully, looking under each. Peter sneezed. Achoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. Mr. McGregor tried to put his foot on Peter, but Peter jumped out of a window, which was too small for Mr. McGregor. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp with sitting in that can. After a time he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in and out of the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans for her family in the wood. Peter asked her which way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard a noise of scratch, scratch, scratch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed upon the wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter started to run as fast as he could along a straight walk behind a blackberry bush. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him. Oh no! But Peter did not care. He slipped. Catch him. He slipped under the gate. Did you get that? Peter never stopped running or looked behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped to the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime, she said. But Flopsy, Mopsy and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end.